Hello my friends, and welcome back to another Baldur's Gate 3 build guide. Hope you're all doing well. Today we're covering a character who is the perfect leader for a group of adventurers. Some leaders lead from the front, charging into combat and having their followers inspired by their great deeds of heroism on the front line to follow them into the breach, and some leaders are strategists, working from behind the lines to provide advice and safety and disrupt enemy plans. We're going to build a character who is much more the latter, a character who oversees the battlefield, providing a place of safety for their allies to fall back into, disrupting enemy plans at every turn by acting with almost every possible action that you can take when it's not your turn, this character can do, and stopping enemies in their tracks, while also providing a perfect leader in social encounters with expertise in every dialogue skill, giving you some of the best dialogue access in the game, and having some of the most powerful supporting tools in the game at your disposal. This character also does quite reasonable damage and can output a quite substantial amount of control on enemies, and so if you are looking for a character to support from the back line, a character whose job is to encourage your party to the greatest potential that they can reach, then this is the character for you. I'm using Wyll as the example character here because this is a Warlock build, or at least partly a Warlock build, but if you are looking to build this as a custom character from the ground up, then the best race to choose by far, I think, is going to be Half Drow. They get shield proficiency, which this build won't get naturally, and so getting access to shields is going to always be excellent, and get once per day casts of darkness, giving you an extra use of darkness per day, which synergizes extremely well with your Warlock levels to give you additional use of darkness, which is going to be an important safety bubble for your team to retreat to. That's how we're setting up our backline fortress, is by hiding in a cloud of darkness from which we can support our allies. Other great options are Half Wood Elf for shield proficiency, as well as the bonus movement speed, or Githyanki for medium armor and the once per day Misty Step, which is a great repositioning tool. You can also go with Halfling to reroll ones, or Gnome for additional mental saving throws, both of which are going to be excellent for this character as well. This character will also benefit from a background that gives you persuasion proficiency, because that will just it'll free up a skill point to spend on something else. So if you take, for example, the guild artisan background, you get persuasion and insight, making you even better at dialogue skills than this character will already be, and that's obviously going to be excellent as well. Other than that, nothing else to talk about. Let's get into the level 1 build. So we're going to start with a level of Bard. Bard is excellent to begin with because it gives us amazing skill access, and obviously we want to have the best skills possible, and it sets us up for a lot of the supporting tools that we're going to use throughout the rest of the game. We take Bard mostly for skills, but we also, of course, want Bard's excellent access to spells, and so we are going to take Minor Illusion, which is going to be very useful for repositioning and grouping enemies. Very on theme for this character. You can have this character group enemies for an ally's Fireball or AoE Tiger Barbarian Swing or something along those lines. And then with our second cantrip, we're going to go ahead and take Friends. On Honor mode, you have to be careful with when you cast Friends, of course. Either only cast it on enemies you intend to fight anyways, or leave the area right after casting it, but it's still extremely useful for any dialogue-focused character to have Friends. For our spell selection at level 1, we are going to take Healing Word, which is obviously excellent and will be one of the things that enables this character to provide such powerful support from the backline, is we can provide supporting actions with Healing Word with bonus actions, while dishing out great damage with Eldritch Blast or the other action spells that we are going to be using in combat. For low-level combats, you also want Dissonant Whispers. It's just an excellent control spell at low levels, dealing decent damage for the level, but also being only a single save for 2 turns of disable. Against melee enemies, this completely shuts them down for 2 full turns, and it's just an incredible spell as a result. And then I recommend having a bunch of support spells as my other spells. If you don't have Longstrider from somewhere else in the party, you want that on this character. And this is a decent character to take it because it will give you access to yet another supporting ability, so it's on theme for this character. And you can take stuff like Disguise Self and Speak with Animals if you don't have access to that from the item or from potions. So I'm going to recommend that you take Longstrider and Speak with Animals just as flavor options. If you don't need these two because you're just using potions for Speak with Animals or have Longstrider from elsewhere, you can take Thunderwave to push enemies away from you, or additional supporting options like Featherfall or Fairy Fire. Tasha's Hideous Laughter will become useful later, so we'll probably pick that up later down the line, but for now, we're better off with Dissonant Whispers as our crowd control spell in the early game. For our ability selection, we are going to need to fix this ability selection for sure. We are going to go with a somewhat greedy stat split. We're going to go with 16 Con and 14 Dexterity, and then we are going to take 17 Charisma and 10 Wisdom. We're going to be in the back line often enough that we will not have to worry too much about our Wisdom saves, because enemies will usually not be able to target us with ranged saving throw targeting effects, since we'll be way in the back surrounded by a cloud of darkness and unable to be targeted with ranged effects. AoE fears can still get us, so you may want to find a way to become immune to fear, but other than that, your Wisdom save doesn't actually need to be that high, and taking 17 Charisma allows us to use Actor to gain expertise into dialogue skills when we get our first feat. For that reason, we are not going to take Deception or Performance proficiency at level 1, because we're going to get those for free from the Actor feat, and that will allow this character to also fill the role of your lock-picking character if you want. You can put Point in Sleight of Hand, and then they can be your lock-picking character alongside their okay decks. They'll be okay at doing Sleight of Hand. Not as good as a dedicated rogue, but still pretty reasonable. Or you can just place these in some of the knowledge skills in order to more easily pass, say, Arcana and Religion checks, which are something that you're going to need in dialogue. If you took the Guild Artisan background, you can grab Insight and another knowledge skill as well with the extra skills that you will have. Obviously, Wyll's selection of Animal Handling and Survival is not terribly useful for this character, but you will be able to use your background or whatever if you're a custom character in order to get access to even a couple more skills, which is great and one of the things that you take a bard for. Other than that, no major decisions to make at level 1, so let's move on to level 2. At level 2, we're going to branch out and we're going to take Warlock. We currently don't have a mainstay combat spell. We don't have a cantrip that or we didn't have a cantrip that allowed us to do damage in combat, so taking a level of Warlock really amps up the amount of damage that this character can do in the early game. For combat potential in the early game, Warlock is one of the best. The additional damage from Eldritch Blast, especially once we get Agonizing Blast next level, is some of the most solid and consistent damage that you can do at early levels, and gives this character a great combat option while still passing out all of the support options that bards provide. For that reason, leveling up a little bit in Warlock gives us some significantly more utility and gets this character to the point of being the perfect leader that we want it to be much earlier. For our cantrip selection, of course, we're going to take Eldritch Blast, and for our second cantrip, we already have Mage Hand from our Bard level, so I'm going to recommend taking Blade Ward. That way, if an enemy does get close to you, you can cast Blade Ward to have the damage reduction from Blade Ward until an ally can get close enough to assist you, which will keep you safe even if an enemy ends up in the back line and somehow attacks your general in his fortress. For our subclass selection, one of the fun things about this character is I think all three choices are viable here. You can take Fiend, which gets you the additional hit points, which aren't going to be a huge component of your defensive setup because you won't be killing things that often with this character. It's not really a damage-based character, but will come up occasionally and be a nice boost when it does. But more importantly, the Fiend Warlocks get access to Command, which is both very on flavor for a leader character and also one of the most powerful spells in the game that can really amp up the control aspect of this character. Great Old One gives you passive fear from Mortal Reminder, which is excellent, of course, and is going to add a whole bunch of additional fears to your arsenal, shutting down enemies regularly, just passively, as you are passing out Eldritch Blast attacks. And since you're going to be spending a lot of turns just spamming Eldritch Blasts, you're going to get a lot of fears from Great Old One, even if you don't necessarily build for critical hits, and this character can also be built with critical hit gear to get lots of extra fear from Great Old One to really shut down enemies. So that will work as well. Or Archfey gives you a more defensively minded option, where if enemies get close, you can use your Fey presence to fear them away from you. You won't be plunging into combat to use this ability proactively, but if you want a more defensively minded setup for this character, I think that Archfey is actually quite good, and so all three of these options are viable. For this example character, I'm going to use Great Old One because I think that it is probably the most powerful of the three in terms of how much passive benefit it gives you. The amount of crowd control that you just get passively from playing Great Old One Warlock with this character is excellent. All of your attacks will be with advantage, so you're very likely to critically hit on any given turn, and when you do, it shuts down a whole bunch of enemies. So Great Old One is just always an excellent choice, but I think that any of the three subclasses can be viable here. For our spell selection here, we are going to take Hex and Armor of Agathis, because we already know Dissonant Whispers. You could also choose not to take Dissonant Whispers at level 1 and grab this from your Warlock spells, but this way we get two spells that you can only learn from your Warlock levels, both of which you're going to want. In the early game, Hex is going to be a lot of additional damage, and Armor of Agathis is just a great defensive option, so both of those are nice to have. No other decisions to make at level 2, so let's move on to level 3. And at level 3, we're going to take another level of Warlock so that we can get access to Agonizing Blast. This is just the best Eldritch Invocation and turns your Eldritch Blast from a pretty solid damage spell to an excellent damage spell and will be really important in the later game. Of course, this character benefits from having as much charisma as possible, both for the dialogue skills and save DCs of the spells and also for your Eldritch Blast damage, so will benefit from any additional effects that you can use to gain additional charisma, of which there's a few story events in the game that you can use. And for our second Eldritch Invocation, we're going to go ahead and take Devil's Sight. Devil's Sight lets us see in darkness, which we're going to get next level, and so that enables us to set up safety bubbles for this character, which it can hide in, staying safe in the back lines of combat, as well as allowing your allies to retreat into the darkness to prevent enemies from targeting them with ranged attacks. Enemies who cannot see through magical darkness will not be able to make ranged attacks into the darkness, and enemies who try to get up close to you and try to make melee attacks will be attacking at disadvantage. So if you can see in the dark and they can't, you have a massive advantage inside your darkness clouds, and this gives you a safety zone for your characters that they can retreat into if they are getting in trouble, keeping them safe from ranged enemies, as well as giving you a safe base of operations to be shouting your strategic advice from the backline. For our spell selection at this level, we're just going to go ahead and grab Tasha's Hideous Laughter, because this will be a useful disable spell at this point. There are some points where you're going to just want this for certain enemies, and also because there's not anything else here that we particularly need. At level 3, we're going to take another level of Warlock, because I think it's really important that we get Darkness as soon as possible. Now, if you are playing a half-drow and already have access to Darkness from your racial abilities, then you may not need to level in Warlock up to level 3. You can possibly stop at level 2 and do your Bard levels earlier. Or if you are using Arrows of Darkness from a party member, fired by a party member, then you may not need to level up in Warlock as aggressively, and so I wanted to mention that as a possible variant. You could take your Bard levels earlier, get your skills and more defensive abilities online if you want to lean this character more towards support. Obviously, leveling up in Warlock does give you all the great things that Warlocks get, so I think that it is probably a little bit stronger in terms of combat potential, especially for Honor Mode, to do the Warlock levels first, but both can work, and both are very flavorful and powerful ways to build the character. For our spell selection at this level, of course, we're going to take Darkness, and then we are going to take Pact of the Tome here. I think that Pact of the Tome is useful for this character mostly for guidance, which of course is very on flavor for the character and also is great for a dialogue-focused character to have access to guidance. You can now guidance yourself to hit even higher numbers in your conversation skills, which is excellent. You also get Vicious Mockery, which we didn't take earlier, so now we have that. And Thorn Whip can be very useful as well, because this character has a pretty significant sub-theme of repositioning enemies around the battlefield. We're going to be using using Repelling Blast and Thorn Whip to push and pull enemies away from us and towards us, just disrupting enemy plans constantly, keeping them trapped inside damaging effects, and so having access to both of those spells is really cool. So it's really for the cantrips that we want Pact of the Tome on this character. We can replace a spell with a more dedicated combat spell. Since you'll mostly be concentrating on darkness at this point, you can replace Hex probably with something else, like Misty Step for emergencies, or Cloud of Daggers to give you a more damaging concentration option if that's something that you want. You don't have to do this, but I think that this character is rarely going to be concentrating on Hex at level 4, so you should probably just grab Misty Step in case of emergency. At character level 4, we definitely want to get a feat, because we would love to get expertise in those dialogue skills, so we're going to take Warlock, or at character level 5, we're going to take Warlock level 4, and we're going to pick up Actor. Even though we didn't learn Deception or Performance as skills, we now have expertise in them, meaning we get double our proficiency bonus plus our charisma, so we have extremely high numbers in those 2 dialogue skills already, and our dialogue skills are only going to get better from here. For our spell selection at this level, there's a bunch of options that you can take. Cloud of Daggers is just always good to have. Invisibility, if you need it for out-of-combat utility, are 2 of the best ones there. You could also take Mirror Image if you are finding yourself in trouble a lot. You can use Mirror Image to give yourself a little extra layer of protection. Combined with the disadvantage from darkness, enemies will very rarely be able to hit you if you have Mirror Image on. I'm going to recommend Cloud of Daggers just because it's useful in a bunch of encounters, but we're probably swapping out whatever we take at level 2 anyways pretty soon, so it doesn't matter that much. For our cantrip selection here, we're going to go ahead and grab Bone Chill. We still attack with Charisma with this, and this is going to be very useful against undead, as well as preventing enemies from healing. So it's just, even though it's less damage than Eldritch Blast, it's a great utility option to have available for this character. If you can hit enemies with Bone Chill and turn off their healing, that matters in a lot of encounters, and giving undead disadvantage for a full turn on all their attack rolls is a pretty significant disable, and also adds to the character's theme of stopping enemies from doing what they want to do. In particular, there's a couple encounters late in Act 1 or early in Act 2 that are undead, that giving them disadvantage on their attack rolls just if you hit them with Bone Chill wins that encounter much, much more easily, which can sometimes be quite difficult encounters otherwise. Then finally we get Warlock level 5, and you do, I think, want to go up to Warlock level 5 and get 3rd level spells, because Warlock's 3rd level spells are just so powerful. You also get Animate Dead, Haste, and Call Lightning, so that gives you a couple other spell options. You can use Animate Dead to give your whole party a boost for the entire day. The Animate Dead skeletons are a lot of extra damage. Or you can use Haste on an ally, although usually you're still going to be concentrating on either Darkness or the spell we're about to select. And Call Lightning is useful if you really want to stay far back. You can cast Call Lightning, move up into range of activating Call Lightning, and then move backwards and stay an even further distance away from the front lines of combat by getting to be mobile instead of being tied down to wherever you placed your Darkness Cloud with Call Lightning. For our spell selection here, we're going to go ahead and grab Hunger of Hadar, and then we are going to replace a spell, and we will probably replace at this point Cloud of Daggers. It was useful for a couple encounters in the mid-game, and will still be useful later on. You could also replace Armor of Agathis or Tasha's. Any of those are replaceable, but we're definitely going to pick up Counterspell. This is one of the ways that this character can just say no to what enemies are doing, and you will have 2 3rd level spell slots, so you can pretty much always counter stuff. So you're going to have now one of the best reactions in the game available, as well as having Darkness and Hunger of Hadar just as incredible combat options. For our Eldritch Invocation at this level, we're taking Repelling Blast, because this lets us again reposition enemies around the battlefield, making it easier for our allies to defeat them. At the next level, we are going to go back into Bard. We've now gotten basically the best things that Warlock gives you. Now that you have Hunger of Hadar and Counterspell, Warlock is has achieved a lot of what we want for it from this build, and we can now set up a safety bubble, push enemies back and forth, and do excellent damage every turn of combat. So why not make ourselves able to do that more often and more reliably with Song of Rest? Song of Rest basically gives us an extra, well, it does. It gives you an extra short rest every day, which is an extra 2 Warlock spells every day, and in combination with Knowing Animate Dead, that's more zombies or skeletons, in combination with just having casts of Darkness and Hunger of Hadar, that's just more encounters that you can do during the day, and also you can think of it as giving your allies a pep talk in between combats if you want to stay on theme for the leader of the party. For our spell selection at this level, you're just going to grab any utility spell that you don't have access to yet, something that you think you might need, or Thunderwave just as an emergency option. At this point, there's not a lot here that you really need from this level of Bard, but Featherfall is always useful to have, Heroism can prevent fears, or Thunderwave can push enemies away. We'll probably just take Thunderwave. Then, at Bard level 3, we get to take College of Lore. And College of Lore is just really fun for this character. Now we have Counterspell and Cutting Words that we can use as defensive reactions. So while we are safely ensconced in our bubble at the back lines, we can be shouting out insults at the enemies, advice to our allies with inspiration, countering enemy spells and stopping them from doing anything, pushing them around the battlefield, and pulling them across the battlefield. Battlefield control is a term that gets thrown around a lot in sort of gaming circles, meaning things like walls and placements, but this character has some real battlefield control in the sense that they control the pace and flow of combat by preventing enemies from doing what they want to do and allowing allies to operate in safety. That, I think, makes it an extremely fun and satisfying character to play, as well as a pretty powerful one with a lot of options for redirecting enemy actions to become harmless. For our spell selection at this level, it's level 2 spells, so we can go back and grab Cloud of Daggers, which is still just always useful to have, just a very powerful effect. Or we can take Enhance Ability. We're coming up probably at level 8 on some of the important skill checks that you're going to need to make outside of combat, and Enhance Ability will let you do that. You can also take... do that more easily. You can also take Heat Metal, which is still a very useful spell in certain encounters. While it does take your concentration, so you're not going to cast it that often, there are some encounters that Heat Metal just solves on its own, so that's an option as well. Or you can go back and grab another utility spell like Invisibility, Knock, or Silence. There's a lot of options here, but mostly we are taking this level for the Lore Bard effects. We also now get expertise in 2 skills and learn 3 more skills, which is just awesome. So now we can take expertise in Intimidation and Persuasion and have plus 10s in all of these. The number isn't showing up properly in the skill section because it doesn't calculate it correctly, but we now have plus 10 in every one of these skills. And we can take as our proficient skills just anything else that we want. More dialogue skills, like all of the intelligent skills we can take and now just know everything, as well as having insight on all the dialogue skills. Or we could take something like acrobatics if you're finding yourself getting pushed around. But mostly, I think it's really fun that we get to know every single knowledge skill and and have expertise in every single charisma skill. And if you took the Guild Artisan background, you'd have insight here as well. Then at Bard level 4, we're going to grab another feat, and we're just going to go ahead and increase our charisma. If you used Ethel's Hair to hit 20 charisma, so I should mention this as well, if you want to use Ethel's Hair, you can do that on this character to just hit 20 charisma instead of taking Actor. Then you'd just grab Alert at this level, because Alert is obviously broken, and going first is really powerful. For our spell selection, we're going to go ahead and take a utility spell here, something that we think we need. And for our cantrip selection, we are, as always, going to grab True Strike to annoy people in the comments. Bard level 5, we get access to 3rd level spells, and this gives us a bunch of extra options for really cool spells that we can take, all of which are very powerful. Hypnotic Pattern is still excellent at this stage in the game, as is Fear. Both of these are really good crowd control spells. Which one you prefer, honestly, is up to you. I tend to like Hypnotic Pattern a little more when I have access to both of them, just because it's a bigger AoE, so it shuts down more of a combat. And then we're going to replace a spell, one of the ones that we don't need at this point, one of the sort of random spells that we took when we didn't have amazing options. We're going to go ahead and replace that with Plant Growth or Glyph of Warding. Glyph of Warding if you feel like you want more combat spells, or Plant Growth if you feel like you want more battlefield control. But I think Plant Growth is just so funny for this character. One, it combos really well with Hunger of Hadar, so you can lock enemies in the Hunger of Hadar forever. Two, you have Repelling Blast, so you can push enemies back into the Plant Growth, potentially while they're taking Hunger of Hadar damage, and just keep them locked down forever. And so I think that Plant Growth is really fun for this character. All 3 of those options, though, plus Fear, are all good options as well, and will definitely not go amiss. You also get Font of Inspiration, so now you can pass out cutting words more often per day, which is going to be extremely useful, meaning that you can be consistently shouting insults and advice from the backline in safety, preventing enemies from doing anything. At this point, you have a choice. You could either go 2 more Warlock levels to get higher level Warlock spells, or just higher level spell slots in general, as well as Entropic Ward. So if you are getting attacked, you can use Entropic Ward if you are a Great Old One Warlock, or you can get the bonus, the skill check bonus from Fiend Warlock to make you even better at succeeding on skills, or the defensive invisibility from Archfey Warlock to make you even harder to kill. All of those are great options. Or you can continue to level in Bard to get magical secrets, giving you access to a bunch of other ways to build the character and even more impressive things that you can do. In my opinion, I think it's better to get magical secrets, because this is just such a powerful effect. Getting access to all of the spells in the game is really great. Even if we already know a bunch of the other ones, a bunch of the best spells, there's definitely some really powerful options here that we can choose from that make this character even better. To stay on theme, though, I think that one of the best picks is actually Mass Healing Word or Warden of Vitality. You can use either of these as bonus actions from inside your safety bubble to heal your allies, and apply all the buff on healing items to your entire party with Mass Healing Words, or to one character at a time with Warden of Vitality, both of which are very powerful effects. Combined with Healing Word and Mass Healing Word, this character is one of the best for the buff on heal gear, and will be a character that actually does extremely well in terms of using that very powerful effect. So you get access to one of the sort of broken mechanics in the game, as well as just being a powerful character. Other options here include Command, which is just always good, Sleet Storm, which is an excellent battlefield control option, or you could take... I guess you could even take Spirit Guardians. You probably don't want to be in melee that often, but it is an option. So I think I would go with one of Mass Healing Word and either Sleet Storm or Command personally. But honestly, how you want to customize your character with magical secrets is really open, and I think that one of the great things about this character is you can take it in a lot of directions from this point. For here, though, we're just going to grab Command, because I think that it will allow you to more easily disable a bunch of enemies, which is something that this character really does want to do at this point, and then Mass Healing Word to pass out the buffs. For our spell selection for Bard, we're going to grab whichever of the other spells we didn't take. We'll go ahead and take Glyph of Warding here. And then we get access to 4th level Bard, which gives us Confusion. Confusion or Freedom of Movement are the picks here, I think, or possibly both if you find you have a 1st level spell that you aren't using. If any of your lower level spells aren't seeing use, you're probably not using Dissonant Whispers that much at this point. And Confusion is just a very powerful debuff for the entire encounter. You can also cast it on a bunch, so it will work very well again with the theme because you can cast it on a group of enemies, and it's as though you confuse them by disrupting their orders or something like that, if you really want to think of this as a general or strategist character, but also just a very powerful thing to be doing from the back line, even though it's concentration. And freedom of movement is a great panic button. If one of your allies gets stunned, you'll almost always be able to run out and save them with freedom of movement, so I recommend picking that up. We'll just swap out Dissonant Whispers here in order to give you access to freedom of movement as an emergency button. And that does it for the Grand Strategist character. I think that this is a really cool archetype that doesn't see a lot of play in Dungeons & Dragons, the sort of leader archetype, but this character does a great job of standing in the back line and passing out buffs and advice to its allies from perfect safety. In the endgame, this character is going to have 4 uses of Bardic Inspiration and 3 short rests, so that's 16 uses of Cutting Words per day. That's a lot of hits turned into misses or successes turned into failures with saving throws, as well as up to 12 counterspells per day with 8 Warlock spell slots plus 4 Bard spell slots, and so that's a lot of countered spells. Now, you do need to be careful to counter spells of 3rd level or lower, unless you're using your 4th level spell slot, because otherwise you are going to not be able to actually counter the spell. But the sheer number of spells that you can counter, I think, really makes up for that. You could also have built this character with 7 Warlock, 5 Bard, just for a couple more 4th level spell slots, but honestly, I don't think you really need 4th level spells compared to 3rd level spells on this character. A lot of the best spells you get are things like Darkness that don't scale, so you can just use lower level spell slots happily and have more variety by getting magical secrets, but it is worth mentioning the alternate build as well. For items for this character, there's a couple directions that we can go. As with all Warlock builds, the Potent Robe is probably best in slot because increasing the damage of your Eldritch Blast is just so incredibly valuable, as well as getting temporary hit points equal to your Charisma modifier, keeping you alive much more easily. In combination with that, you can take anything that improves your hit rolls with spells, like the Daredevil Gloves. That will give you a much higher chance of landing Eldritch Blasts. And a really fun item for this character that stays quite strong even until the endgame is Nature's Snare. Whenever you attack an enemy, and this works off of any attack, including Eldritch Blast attacks, it has a chance to entangle the enemy, which is an extremely powerful effect. And even though the save DC is low, because you are Eldritch Blasting constantly, you are going to be passing out a lot of saves, and enemies will have to make them against your Mortal Reminders. So that's just a lot of passive crowd control that you get if you have Nature's Snare and are a Goo Warlock. Items that increase your armor class or dexterity or both, like armor class or initiative or both, like the Gloves of Dexterity, are really good, but anything that improves your armor class, a good shield is pretty nice on this character, so because you have shield proficiency, so just any shield will give you decent additional armor class, or you can use the Bracers of Defense if you aren't going to use a shield, but I would recommend just using a shield. All of those are really good. And anything that improves your spell save DCs or initiative are premium on every caster, and this one is no exception, so definitely look out for items like that. You also get access to 2 really broken item combos. One of them is the buff on heal items, and this character is one of the best for using them because you'll always be safe, so you can pass these out as bonus actions with Healing Word or Mass Healing Word, or with Warden of Vitality very easily, and gain all of the buffs of Blade Ward and Bless and bonus hit points from this item set, for example, that improves your party's odds dramatically. And this character can also be one of the most powerful at stacking Radiant Orbs, which is one of the more broken mechanics in the game, completely shutting down boss attacks, because if you have the Callous Glow Ring to do 2 additional damage to illuminated enemies, this won't work against enemies in Hunger of Hadar, by the way, so you do have to be a little careful about that, but enemies who are outside of your Darkness or Hunger of Hadar, the Callous Glow Ring does 2 extra Radiant damage, and then combined with stuff that stacks Radiating Orb, like these Luminous Gloves or the Radiant Armor, that can stack up massive amounts of orbs because that works off of every tick of the Eldritch Blast, so you're getting a lot of Radiant Orbs stacked on bosses and can shut down their attack rolls immediately. So this character gets access to some broken combos as well as just being a powerful and flavorful character that supports its party exceptionally. Alright, my friends, I hope that you've enjoyed this look at the perfect leader, and as always, if you have, of course, you can feel free to leave a comment and like the video. Both of those things help me out a ton with the algorithm, and you can subscribe to my channel for more Baldur's Gate 3 builds and other strategy game content. Cheers, folks. I'll catch you next time.